Hello and welcome to the Ohio Chamber of Commerce's Elected Officials Interview Series. I'm Rick Carfani, I'm Senior Vice President for Government Affairs, and I'm happy to be joined today by a good friend of mine, a former colleague in the state legislature, and the treasurer for the state of Ohio, Robert Sprague. Robert, thank you for being here.
Really glad to be here with you, Rick, and join you here for this today. Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Great. Well, we got a lot of great questions to ask you and a lot to learn about your office to share with our members and with all Ohioans. So we'll start off with, you are now in your second term as our state treasurer. Talk a little bit about how you first got involved in public service.
Well, it goes back to, I guess, when I first moved back to Findlay. I was the city treasurer and then the city auditor. And I was a city auditor for about 3 months, and we had a 100-year flood in August 20th of 2007. I can still tell you like the exact day. I mean, it's etched in my memory. And we kind of, as we recovered from that flood, once we were done with that, I learned that the state had an $8 billion budget deficit, right? And that was when you and I began our time at the legislature.
Right.
And so I remember going over to my mother's house and I said, Mom, I think I'm going to run for the legislature. And she's like, Robert, why would you do that? The state has an $8 billion budget deficit. And I said, well, because, Mom, if you know that there's an $8 billion budget deficit, so does everybody else in the state. And so I think there's going to be the political will for us to do something about that. I've got this financial background. And so there's a kind of a short synopsis of my early time in politics.
You talked about your financial background, not only as city auditor, but then you also came from the private sector. You worked at Ernst & Young as well.
Yep.
That is clearly translated over into your duties as state treasurer. There was a bill in the last General Assembly that was signed into law that both your office supported and the Ohio Chamber of Commerce supported, and that was Senate Bill 1, which ensures that all high school students receive some level of instruction in financial literacy. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of financial literacy in Ohio and how your office might be engaging in this area?
Sure. Well, before the podcast started, you and I were talking a little bit about housing and how important that is for workforce and all these other elements. And I think that's very true, but it's a little bit like if you go back to the days of Ernst & Young, we used to ask why. Why does this happen? And then you'd ask a second why. 7 times until you got down to 7 times. Why does that thing, what is the underlying element? And at the end of the day, if people don't have building blocks of financial knowledge, it's difficult to manage a family budget, be able to afford a home. And so it's something that's essential to everyone in the state of Ohio. I tell my kids, look, the calculus is great if you're going to do engineering, but everybody uses the financial knowledge each and every day of their lives. So it's very applicable. When we first got into the office, we said, look, there's a lot of programs around the state that we want to recognize that are doing extraordinary things in terms of financial education around the state. So first thing we did was we created a Compass Award that actually recognizes local entities that are doing a phenomenal job with kids. Matter of fact, we gave one out up in Cleveland maybe 3 weeks ago to help educate seniors to stay, financial knowledge to stay in their home. And so, just a lot of phenomenal things that are going around the state. And one of the programs that we love, we think is absolutely phenomenal because we know that it produces the results that kids need, is Real Money, Real World with the OSU Extension. And so we've entered into a partnership at the Treasurer's Office with OSU Extension's Real Money, Real World program, and they go before kids. And what I really love about it is that it's experiential. And my son Graham went through it. And Graham discovered that he went bankrupt because he had, I think, 5 different pets. And those became very costly for him in his simulated
family
budget.
Members, come on.
Right, I know, right? He's buying too much dog food or something. I don't know. But that type of experiential learning makes it fun for kids, and it has a real impact on them. So we are very, very proud to support Senate Bill 1 and also very proud in the Treasurer's Office to have this great partnership with OSU Extension's Real Money, Real World.
Those are great initiatives. And after you took office as state treasurer, you established another great initiative, which is a Pay for Success program, and it's called Results Ohio. Talk a little bit about Results Ohio and offer some insight for us as to what exactly a Pay for Success model entails.
Well, you remember when you and I were in the legislature, and we were working a little bit on the addiction issues that we faced, the opioids at the time. And I just remember sitting in committee. I was, chairman of the Medicaid subcommittee, and people would come forward and they say, "Well, Mr. Chairman, if you only funded more recovery housing beds, we could fix this problem." And we would fund more recovery housing beds.
Yeah.
And we come back a year later, and the program was it just didn't have the impact. It wasn't the silver bullet that we thought it was going to be.
Right.
And we kept doing this on and on. And I thought to myself, we got to come up with a program at the state level that rewards results, so that we're only paying for the things that work. And we're not wasting taxpayer money, but also we've got some programs then, like arrows in our quiver, that we can shoot at these problems that are actually going to fix the issue. Mm-hmm. That's the engineer in me, back my training. So we created this new Results Ohio program. It's really simple to understand. Instead of the normal way of paying for things in the government, where we give out a grant of $500,000, we go and somebody receives the grant and then they go set up the program. Instead, this works kind of backwards. You go and you actually find the money to set up the pilot from a private entity, like a community foundation, and then you run the pilot. If it produces the results and is successful, then the state pays the community organization back for the pilot project. So we kind of...
Positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement. Also, we let private capital do some vetting up front to see if it's actually going to work, which is a good discipline as well. Mm-hmm. And we're getting the private community involved. So there's a lot of things kind of going on, but it's a pay for success program. It's unique. I think we're the only one in the country that has it in the treasurer's office. But as I told my staff, I said, I want us to have significance. And one of the things in our mission statement is that we be bold innovators mm-hmm. for the people of the state of Ohio. And that's our stake in the ground, to be innovators. That's
great. So Results Ohio is an example of a program that you've stood up. Mm-hmm. A different program that you inherited as treasurer is mm-hmm. the longstanding AgLink program. Mm-hmm. And that's a program that provides reduced interest loans to farmers and agribusinesses. Mm-hmm. But you've recently made some great changes to that program. Talk about those changes and really what inspired those.
Well, you've got a lot of agribusinesses as part of the Ohio Chamber.
Right.
And we had a roundtable up in Bowling Green with agribusinesses and farmers. And this was probably maybe a year and a half ago. And at the time, they were complaining about the rampant inflation. Mm-hmm. And they said, look, the price of Roundup's gone from $11 a gallon to $74 a gallon, was the example the farmer used. And we thought, holy cow, that's crazy. How could you have the price of inputs be going up this much? And so we took this AgLink program and we said, how could we make this an inflation fighting tool? So we reformed it, we changed it, we took the caps off of it. We went to a year-round program so farmers and agribusinesses can get access to these low-interest loans at any time during the year, not just at a specific window. We included for the agribusinesses, and we also included cooperatives, because all the farmers buy things through cooperatives. So we made these changes, and like the proof is in the pudding, right? So this past year, after we made these changes, we've actually had a record-setting year. So in terms of both the dollar amount of the loans and the number of applications, so it's been really successful in terms of meeting farmers' needs this last year, and we think it's going to continue to be a sought-after program. We can reduce the interest rate anywhere from 1% or 0.5% up to 3% for a farmer's planning loan.
Wow,
yeah,
that's transformative. Yeah. You're our state's treasurer, but you wear a lot of hats, but you're also a devoted husband. Mm-hmm. You are a father to 5 children. Mm-hmm. And you continue to reside in Findlay up in Hancock County. Mm-hmm. And I've made that drive, and it's a little under 2 hours, I think, one way. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about how do you maintain that work-life balance? Because mm-hmm. you live in Findlay. Mm-hmm. You make that commute on a daily basis.
I do. Well, there's 2 keys to that, Rick. The first is I have a great team in Columbus. Yeah. And nobody does anything without a great team. We have a great team in the treasurer's office, phenomenal public servants that have an incredible amount of expertise. They value transparency, service, and stewardship. All these things go back to our values. And so I'm very, very blessed to have an incredible team. They do a fantastic job. And the second piece is that my wife likes carrot cake. And so I figured out this place in Columbus that she really likes. And so I try to bring home carrot cake to not get in too much trouble when I'm running late
happy
and coming
wife,
home.
Happy
right.
life.
So anyway, those are my 2 keys to success there.
That's great. Well, and speaking of the importance of family, mm-hmm. Another critical program that you developed and have implemented is what's called Family Forward. And that supports prospective parents that are navigating the adoption process. So on any given day here in the state of Ohio, we have 15,000 children that are being cared for away from their parents, 8,500 that are in foster care, more than 3,400 children that are waiting to be adopted. Talk a little bit about the financial hurdles that are associated with adoption, and what does Family Forward do to address those?
We were talking with a parent, and he was talking about the high cost of adoption. And the example that he had with his family, I think it cost between $40,000 to $50,000 for each child that he adopted through a private adoption process. And we thought that was extraordinary. And you just realize the tremendous burden on these families. And I remember saying to him, well, what about the state tax credit? I know we have a state tax credit. What about the federal tax credit? And he said, look, Robert, he said, all these expenses come out of my pocket up front. The lawyer fee, the adoption agency expenses, the home visitation, all these expenses. And so we thought in our office, one of the things we could do would be to lower the cost of a bridge loan. So if you want to adopt a child, to help encourage that, we can lower the cost of that loan to get you through to those state tax credits and help chip away at the cost of adoption and help a family welcome a child into their forever home here in the Buckeye State. That's
great. That really, really is great. And another thing that you've done to transform families through your office is the ongoing use of what are called the stable accounts. I know that those specialized investment accounts have seen a lot of growth since you've become treasurer. What should our viewers know about the stable accounts? If you could maybe highlight those real quick.
Well, just a brief overview on the stable accounts. These are accounts for individuals who are living with a disability here in the state of Ohio. You can put a large amount of money into the stable accounts each year, either money that you yourself earn or that your family puts into the accounts. And the reason that's important is because up till the introduction of the ABLE accounts, or stable account as we call it in Ohio, we had this great rule in Medicaid that we would take away all of your medical benefits and all of your Social Security benefits if you had more than $2,000 in your name, $2,000 worth of assets in your name. And so still yet today, parents are fearful if their child has too much money in their name that they'll have those medical benefits taken away. And obviously that's very important to families. Right. And so our stable accounts are a way for families to be able to allow their loved one to live and work out in the community, pay for their own expenses, take control over their own lives, make their own decisions to the extent that they're able, and have that freedom and that sense of fulfillment. So we think it's a great program. And I'll tell you, if your listeners are interested today, they can work with us to do a payroll deduct on a stable account. So if you're an employer, you're Kroger or whoever, right? You could sign up with our office to do a payroll deduct, so you could put money directly into that stable account for your employees. The way the employees look at that is actually a benefit. So if I have a grandson or a granddaughter who's living with a disability and I have a stable account for them, I can directly put money in there. I don't have to transfer money from my bank account over. I could do it on a paycheck by paycheck basis, just like everything else. So if any of your employers want to partner with us on that, we would love it. We think it's a great program, and I know personally that it makes a huge difference in these families' lives.
That's great information to have. And to your point, I mean, self-determination is so important to those that are living with disabilities. So thank you for that. We're wrapping up here, but we are entering into the state budget season, one that you're familiar with as a former legislator, somebody who sat on the finance committee, who reviewed requests, and now you're on the other side of that podium where you're maybe making those types of requests. So can you talk a little bit? What are some of the specific goals of your office that you are hoping to be fulfilled in the coming biennium?
One of the things we're very much focused on is getting rid of kind of extra regulation and extra verbiage within the Ohio Revised Code as it pertains to the Treasurer's Office. As you know, finance moves quickly, and quite frankly, there's a lot of outdated language and needless regulation and red tape that affects the Treasurer's Office. A great example, we're trying to get rid of it. We're trying to streamline it.
Sure.
So a great example of that would be like the sinking fund. I don't even, when you and I were in the legislature, I didn't even know what the sinking fund was, right? And it's, what we used to do for our lease appropriation bonds. We don't even use it anymore. But that's just one example of things that we need to take out of the revised code that don't actually reflect what the Treasurer's Office is doing, in some ways that we can streamline things with other departments Another great example is ODNR bringing up letters of credit to our office to put in a safe. You know, that was fine when we were doing bearer bonds, when you could take off with the bearer bond and cash it in. But there, you know, ODNR can just keep that in a file cabinet at this point, right? So it's just things that reflect modern business practices and help streamline the operations. We want government to be as efficient as possible.
Real quick for our viewers, can you point them to your website where they can maybe learn about more of these programs that are in place?
Sure. You can go to ohiotreasurer.gov and check out any one of the programs that we talked about today.
Well, Treasurer Sprague, thank you for your time. Thank you for sitting down and talking with the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. It is very clear that beyond being a great steward for our state's funds, you offer a lot of great programs that are available to businesses and Ohioans. And we just thank you for all that you and your staff are doing to contribute not just to quality of life here in the state, but also our economic competitiveness. So thank you for your time, Treasurer.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's great to be with you.
State Treasurer Robert Sprague. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the Ohio Chamber of Commerce's elected officials interview series. And once again, I'm Rick Carfagna. Thank you for joining us.